The chamber was dark, silent, and broken. Dust fell slowly from the cracked ceiling, drifting like dead stars in a forgotten sky. A faint red glow from a failing console gave shape to the figure sitting against the wall. He was not human. His body was thin, tall, almost skeletal, with pale gray skin covered in wounds. His breathing was shallow, labored, every inhale sounding like broken glass. One arm was missing below the elbow, burned away. His other hand shook as he reached for the recording device. The last alien. His eyes, deep black pools reflecting no light, stared into nothing. Then, slowly, he leaned closer to the recorder. His voice came out weak, cracked, but filled with something heavier than pain. Regret. If anyone finds this, he whispered, his words trembling but clear. Know the truth. Humans never stop, until we are gone. He coughed, a wet, broken sound, and blood spilled across his chin. He did not wipe it. He simply closed his eyes, remembering. His voice grew softer, but in the silence of the chamber, every word carried the weight of dying worlds. They should never have one. Do you understand? They should never have one. We had fleets, empires, technology forged in 1,000 suns. We had weapons that could erase a planet in seconds. They had nothing. Small bodies, fragile flesh. Weak minds, we thought. And yet. He paused, breathing hard. The recorder blinked, a soft light marking every word. He spoke again, slower this time, almost as if he was confessing not to the device, but to the universe itself. And yet they stood. Again and again. When logic said they should fall, they stood. When numbers said they should surrender, they stood. They stood until the galaxy bent to their will. His head tilted back against the wall. The sound of failing machines hummed in the background, mixing with the faint crackle of fire in the distance. Somewhere beyond the chamber, metal groaned, as if the great structure itself was dying with him. They looked so harmless when they first arrived, he said. So small. So curious. They stumbled into the stars like children finding fire. They smiled when they should have feared. They offered hands when they should have hidden. We laughed at them. Do you hear me? We laughed. The alien's voice turned bitter, filled with shame. We laughed, and that was our mistake. We thought them weak. We thought them slow. We thought they were nothing but another species destined to bow, to serve, to vanish. But humans never stop. The recorder captured every word, every tremble in his voice. He lifted his remaining hand and pressed it against his chest, feeling the slow, uneven rhythm of his failing heart. His eyes grew distant, lost in memory. I was there, he said quietly. I was there when it began. The first war. The first scream. The first human who looked at us not with fear, but with fire in their eyes. They did not run. They did not kneel. They fought. And even when they bled, even when we tore their bodies apart, they fought. The chamber shook slightly. Somewhere outside, an explosion echoed, faint but sharp. He ignored it, his mind far away, his words spilling like confessions carved from sorrow. Do you know what persistence is? He asked, as if someone was listening. It is madness. It is obsession. It is when you face impossible odds and move forward anyway. That is what they are. Persistence given flesh. We thought it was foolishness. We thought they would burn out quickly, like all fragile things. But no. Every defeat only made them stronger. Every loss only sharpened their claws. He leaned closer to the recorder, his black eyes narrowing. They are not the strongest. They are not the fastest. They are not the smartest. But they are the most dangerous. Because they never stop. The words echoed in the broken chamber. His breathing grew weaker, his voice slower. But still, he continued. His mind was caught between the present and the past, between dying silence and burning memories. I saw their world once, he whispered. Blue, green, alive. It was not like ours. It was wild. Chaotic. A place where storms tore the skies, where oceans swallowed land, where beasts hunted in endless cycles of death. They came from that. Born from struggle. Forged in chaos. And we did not understand. He shuddered, remembering. His face twisted with fear, not of death, but of what he had seen. They were shaped by a world that tried to kill them every day. And so, when we tried, they treated us the same. They fought us like they fought the storms. Like they fought their beasts. Not with hope. Not with fear. But with determination. And that is why they won. The recorder's light blinked steadily, the only pulse in the dark chamber besides his slowing heartbeat. He coughed again, blood staining the floor. But his voice carried on, soft but sharp, like a blade cutting through silence. You want to know the truth? They never wanted war. Not at first. They reached out. They tried peace. We rejected it. We mocked them. We saw their kindness as weakness. We saw their patience as stupidity. And when we struck, they changed. The alien's hand clenched into a weak fist. They changed. They became something else. Not monsters. Not demons. Something worse. Something we could never understand. They became survivors. And nothing survives like a human. He looked at the recorder, as if seeing it for the first time. His lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. I speak this not to curse them. Not to hate them. But to warn you. If you find this, if you hear this, know that what we faced was not luck. It was not chance. It was who they are. They will keep going. Always. Until everything in their way is gone. He lowered his head, exhausted, his voice now barely a whisper. And I was there to see it all. The chamber fell silent again. The faint hum of dying machines filled the air. The alien leaned against the wall, his body trembling, but his mind lost in visions of battles long past. His confession was only beginning. His story had just opened. The darkness pressed in closer, but his words lingered, sharp and heavy, ready to pull anyone who listened into the terrifying truth of what humanity. The alien shifted in the broken chamber, his body shaking as another wave of memory swept over him. His voice, though faint, carried the heavy echo of history. The recorder's light blinked steadily, waiting to capture every detail. They were late to the stars, he said softly. So very late. By the time their fragile ships left their home, the galaxy had already been carved into empires. We had rules, laws, alliances. We had ancient rivalries, ancient hatreds. We thought we knew everything the stars could offer. And then, they arrived. His chest rose and fell slowly. He stared at the cracked wall, but his eyes saw far beyond, into the past. At first, they were nothing but a rumor. Broken signals, stray broadcasts drifting from a blue world. A species just learning to crawl beyond its cradle. The other empires laughed. Do you understand? They laughed. Fragile bipeds with short lives and loud emotions. What could they bring to the galaxy except noise? He coughed, the sound ragged and sharp. His hand pressed against his wound, but his voice pushed forward, as if he could not allow silence to win. We thought they were harmless. We thought they were children playing with fire. Even when they built their first colonies, we mocked them. They did not have the elegance of our designs, nor the wisdom of our histories. They were clumsy, reckless. And yet, his eyes narrowed. And yet they did not stop. The chamber's faint red glow deepened, shadows stretching across the walls. His words seemed to thicken the air. They reached further. They adapted faster. Where one world resisted them, they tried again. Where one fleet was broken, another came. Other species, my kind included, dismissed this as stubbornness. But it was more than that. It was persistence. A force we had never faced before. They did not know when to surrender. His head dropped for a moment, as if the weight of the truth bent his neck. Then slowly, he lifted it again. And they had something else. Something even more dangerous than persistence. They had imagination. The word echoed in the chamber like a curse. His lips trembled as he spoke again. We relied on tradition, on tested strategies, on weapons refined over centuries. We believed in patterns, in order. But humans, they dreamed. They imagined what did not exist, and then they built it. Crude at first, yes. Imperfect. But always unexpected. Always something we did not prepare for. He closed his eyes, remembering the first time his people faced humanity in battle. His voice grew heavy, dragging the memory into the present. The first war. I can still see it. A border conflict, small and unimportant. Or so we thought. They had no chance. Their ships were thin metal, their weapons weak. We laughed as our fleets surrounded them. Do you know what they did? He leaned closer to the recorder, his black eyes burning with memory. They fought. Every last one of them. They did not flee. They did not kneel. They fought until their ships were torn apart, until their bodies burned in the void. And even then, their survivors clawed at us with bare hands, as if teeth and nails could pierce steel. It was madness. Madness. His voice cracked, rising with both anger and fear. We thought it was over. We thought they were finished. But every time we thought they were finished, they stood up again. The chamber shook faintly, as if the dying structure itself recoiled at the memory. The alien's breathing grew faster, but he forced himself to continue. Do you know what it does to an empire, to fight something that refuses to die? At first, it amuses you. Then it confuses you. Then, it terrifies you. Because we realized something we had never seen before. They did not fight for conquest. They did not fight for glory. They fought because they refused to be erased. His head tilted, his eyes empty, his words dripping with sorrow. They took losses that would have shattered us. They buried their dead and built new ships from the ruins. They suffered defeats that would have broken our spirit, yet they returned with new weapons, new ideas. We could not understand it. We still cannot. He pressed his palm flat against the floor, as if trying to ground himself in the present. I remember the council meetings. The other empires mocked them still, called them the fragile ones, the crying apes. They laughed as humans sent ambassadors who spoke of peace, of trade, of cooperation. We saw their emotions as weakness. We mistook their tears for fragility. We were fools. His breathing grew heavier, his words slow but sharp. Because those emotions we mocked, they fueled them. Their anger became fire. Their grief became steel. Their hope became weapons sharper than any blade. We could not see it, not until it was too late. He looked at the recorder, his face a mask of grief. They learned from every defeat. Every trap we set they studied. Every failure they remembered. And then, they returned with answers. With new tactics. With new machines. They used imagination like we used tradition. And imagination always wins against predictability. The chamber's silence seemed to lean closer, as if listening. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. I was there when their first great fleet rose. It was not beautiful like ours. It was not refined. It was raw, rough, but deadly. Every ship built from lessons paid in blood. Every weapon born from desperation. And when they came not as conquerors, but as survivors. Survivors who refused to vanish. He shuddered, his thin frame trembling as memories clawed at him. In those battles, I saw something I had never seen before. I saw humans who should have surrendered choose to fight with broken ships. I saw humans who had no chance still charge into the fire. I saw them stand when even the stars seemed to fall against them. And I realized, we were not facing a species. We were facing a storm. His lips trembled, his eyes closing. His voice fell into silence for a long moment before he spoke again. Every time we thought they were finished, They stood up again. The recorder blinked. The alien leaned back, exhausted, his confession pouring out like poison from a wound. The chamber was heavy with his words, with the weight of a truth too terrible to ignore. And yet, he was not finished. The story had only begun to rise, just as humanity. The alien's breath rattled in the silence of the ruined chamber. His confession was flowing deeper now, memories dragging him back to the days when the galaxy itself began to change. The recorder's steady blink reflected in his black eyes, as though marking the rhythm of truth itself. "They learned," he whispered, the word trembling, "faster than we ever imagined. That was the turning point." He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he was no longer a broken survivor hiding in the dark. He was back on the command deck of his people's warship, staring at the impossible sight of humans reshaping the galaxy's balance of power. At first, we thought their progress was chance. Luck. They scavenged fragments of our destroyed ships, pulled apart our weapons, studied our wreckage. We mocked them again. Called them scavengers, thieves, parasites. But parasites only take humans. They transformed. His head fell back against the wall. His voice carried the awe of someone who had seen the unthinkable. They took our machines and made them their own. They copied what they could not understand, and then they improved it. Every time we faced them, they carried new tools, new tricks, new ideas. They had no patience for tradition, no respect for rules. They changed the game every time they entered the field. He coughed, blood painting his lips, but he forced the words out. They learned strategy as quickly as they learned technology. We fought by doctrine, by patterns carved over centuries. Humans had no doctrine. They adapted in the middle of the fight. They broke formations, ignored traditions, created chaos, and somehow, in that chaos, they found victory. The faint hum of dying machines filled the air around him, but his mind was consumed by visions of fire and steel. "I remember the first great defeat my people suffered," he said. "We had them surrounded. Their fleet was small, unprepared, trapped against a dead world. They had no escape. It should have been a simple extermination. But then, they did what no sane commander would ever do. They turned their crippled ships into weapons. They rammed our cruisers, overloaded their reactors, tore apart the battlefield in a storm of fire. They destroyed us by destroying themselves." The alien's hands trembled as he remembered. His voice shook, heavy with horror and disbelief. "We could not understand it. Sacrifice was foreign to us. We valued survival above all. But they threw themselves into the fire, not to survive, but to make sure we fell with them. And in that madness, they found victory." His eyes opened, staring into the dark as though seeing the faces of the dead. After that day, none of us laughed again. The chamber groaned as if echoing his words. He pressed his palm against the cold floor, grounding himself against the flood of memory. They grew bolder. Every defeat became a lesson. Every victory, a step forward. They learned faster than any empire in history. They took weapons that had taken us centuries to perfect and wielded them within years. They studied our biology, our psychology, our weaknesses, and they used it all. We could not keep up. His breathing quickened, his voice rising. And do you know what terrified us most? Not their weapons. Not their ships. It was their imagination. They built weapons we had never dreamed of. They used strategies no mind had ever dared. They saw not what was, but what could be. And every time we thought we understood them, they became something else. He leaned forward, whispering as though sharing a secret with the stars themselves. They broke the rules of war. And when we tried to force them back into those rules, they rewrote them. That was the turning point. The moment we realized we were not fighting soldiers. We were fighting survivors who refused to surrender. The recorder blinked, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. The alien closed his eyes, sinking deeper into memory. "I will never forget the Battle of Asteron's Rift," he whispered. We had gathered the strength of 3 empires. 1,000 ships, more than enough to crush their uprising. They came with only a fraction of our number. Any sane being would have retreated. But not them. Never them. His voice dropped lower, filled with awe and fear. They hid in the rift storms, used the gravity wells, the asteroids, the chaos itself as their allies. Their smaller ships darted between us, striking from shadows. They hacked our comms, turned our own warnings into traps. By the time we understood what they were doing, it was too late. Our fleets burned. The rift became a graveyard of steel. And humanity stood in the ashes, alive. The alien's breathing grew ragged, his body trembling with the weight of what he was recalling. It was not power that scared us. It was not numbers. It was their refusal to surrender. We had crushed them a dozen times before, and each time we thought the war was over. But every time, they returned stronger. They refused to accept the fate we gave them. And slowly, the galaxy began to fear them. His hand dragged across the floor, leaving a faint smear of blood. His voice broke into a whisper again. We realized, too late, that we had awakened something unstoppable. Not because they could not be killed. They could. We killed them by the millions. But they never stopped coming. Every human death seemed to give birth to 2 more willing to fight. Every loss carved into them became fuel for their fire. And no matter how many times we struck them down, they stood again. The alien leaned against the wall, his face pale, his eyes hollow but burning. That was the turning point. The moment we realized we were not fighting a fleeting species, but a tide. A tide that rose higher every time we tried to push it back. A tide that would one day drown us all. The chamber fell silent. The alien's breathing was the only sound, shallow and uneven, yet carrying on. The recorder blinked, steady as a heartbeat, capturing every word of the confession. His story was not yet done. The turning point was only the beginning. The alien slumped further into the shadows of the chamber. The red light flickered weakly across his scarred face. His voice, soft but deliberate, continued the confession that would outlive him. The recorder captured every tremble, every breath, as though the machine itself understood the gravity of the story. The war, the final war, he whispered, was not like the others. The galaxy had finally united against them. Every empire, every fleet, every arm of our combined strength turned to stop humanity. We thought, finally, we would end it. We thought the humans would break. He coughed, a wet sound that echoed in the empty chamber. Blood dripped from his mouth, staining his gray chest, yet he spoke on. His black eyes seemed to see through the walls, into the infinite darkness of space and memory. They were ready for us, he said. Not because we were weak, but because they never believed they were defeated. Every battle we threw at them, they turned it into an opportunity. Every colony we destroyed, every fleet we sank, they rebuilt stronger than before. We thought strategy and numbers were enough. We were wrong. His hand trembled as he reached toward the recorder, as if to emphasize his words. The room felt heavy with the weight of history, every shadow pressing closer. They moved faster than any prediction. Where we expected retreat, they attacked. Where we expected surrender, they resisted. Their fleets were small, but agile, and they used our arrogance against us. I watched as humans destroyed entire colonies without mercy, but not for conquest. They did it to survive, to ensure we could not threaten them again. The alien's voice grew darker, carrying the horror of what he had witnessed. They had learned from our mistakes, from our arrogance, from our cruelty. Every trap we set for them became a lesson. Every ambush we planned taught them how to anticipate the next. And each time they suffered, they rose again, stronger, sharper, more cunning. He paused, closing his eyes, and the silence of the chamber seemed to echo the emptiness of the worlds he had watched fall. I remember the siege of Volcara, he whispered. Our largest fleet had them cornered, trapped in orbit around a mineral-rich planet. We thought victory was assured. But then, they did something we could not understand. They attacked the orbital cannons with ships so small, so fragile-looking, that we laughed. And yet, each strike was precise. Each maneuver calculated. By the end of the first day, half our cannons were gone. Our fleet was confused, disorganized, and human ships were still coming. He shook his head, his thin gray fingers curling over the recorder. They were relentless. They moved like a storm we could not predict. Their courage, it was not born of ignorance. It was born of defiance. They did not fight for glory, for empire, or for power. They fought for freedom. And when a species fights for freedom, no strategy, no weapon, no fleet can contain it. The alien's voice fell to a whisper, as if the sound alone could summon the ghosts of human warriors. They sacrificed everything. Their soldiers threw themselves into fire, into void, into certain death, not because they expected to win, but because they refused to lose. Entire worlds rose against us, and still they fought. They inspired others, not by speeches or diplomacy, but by survival itself. We could not believe it. We could not stop it. He coughed again, blood slicking his hand, but the words did not falter. I watched our greatest minds plan, calculate, and despair. Nothing worked. Every alliance we built fell apart when humans struck. Their fleets were tiny, but their minds were vast. They saw the weak links in our empires, exploited divisions we did not even know existed. And when we tried to anticipate them, they adapted. Again and again. They learned faster than any species I had ever seen. The recorder blinked steadily, catching every word, every trembling confession. The final war was not fought only in space, he continued. It was fought in the minds of every commander, every soldier, every citizen. They broke us with ideas as much as with fire. We were strong. We had fleets, weapons, history, tradition. And yet, they moved as if the rules did not exist. We could not predict them. We could not stop them. We were blind, and they were the storm. His voice grew quiet, reflective, carrying the weight of centuries of defeat. I remember the last great battle, he whispered. We had trapped them in the nebula of Sarathis. Thousands of ships surrounded them, unbreakable walls of metal and fire. Their survival was impossible. And yet, they emerged. Their ships glowed with energy we could not comprehend. Their tactics defied every law of war. We were defeated before the first shot was fired. He pressed a shaking hand to his chest, feeling the weak rhythm of his own life. They fought not for empire, not for territory, but because they refused to be erased. They were a species forged in struggle, hardened in fire, and tempered by countless generations who refused to bow. We had expected weak, fragile creatures. Instead, we found a species that could not be broken. And we fell before them. The alien's eyes narrowed, and the shadows seemed to gather closer around him, listening. The galaxy burned, he said, voice low and steady. All our alliances shattered. All our colonies fell. Humanity moved forward, relentless, unyielding. We had underestimated them at every turn. And every time we thought we had the upper hand, every time we thought we had contained them, they rose again. The final war was not a battle. It was a revelation. We had never faced anything like them. He leaned back, his thin body shaking, his voice softer now, almost mournful. And yet, even as we fell, they did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They simply continued. Not as conquerors, but as survivors. We were the obstacle. They were the tide. And the tide never stops. The alien looked into the blinking red light of the recorder, his eyes hollow but fierce. We thought we were gods. We thought our fleets, our weapons, our strategy could contain the galaxy. But humans are not bound by such things. They are bound by one thing only, the refusal to yield. That is their power. Not strength, not numbers, not speed, but the refusal to yield. A cough shook his body, blood streaking across his gray skin, but he forced the words out. They are the end of all we knew. The galaxy will remember us, the fallen empires, the lost colonies. But they will move forward. And we are gone. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Only the weak red glow of the recorder remained, blinking steadily, capturing the confession of the last of his kind. The final war, he said softly, almost to himself, was not just about humanity. It was about the revelation of what persistence and freedom can achieve. We fought gods, and they were mortal. But they were alive, unbroken, unstoppable. And that is why we lost. That is why humanity stands. That is why the galaxy will never forget the storm that refuses to end. His voice faded, replaced by the hum of dying machines and the echo of 1,000 lost worlds. He slumped fully against the wall, exhausted, bloodied, the last witness of a war no one else would ever tell. And still, somewhere in the distance, humanity. The alien leaned against the cold, cracked wall of what remained of his home world. Dust drifted through the air like tiny specters of the past. His body was broken, scarred, and trembling, but his mind burned with the memories of a galaxy transformed. He reached for the recorder one last time, knowing this confession would outlive him. "If anyone finds this," he whispered, his voice thin and fragile, "know the truth. Humans never stop." He coughed, blood streaking across his gray skin, but he did not falter. His eyes, deep and black, stared into nothing, yet saw everything. He remembered every fleet destroyed, every colony lost, every life sacrificed. He remembered humans who should have died but did not. He remembered the fire in their eyes, the refusal to kneel, the unyielding persistence that had shattered empires. "They came from a small blue world," he continued, voice trembling but steady. "We thought them fragile, emotional, weak, too soft for the stars. But we were fools. We did not understand them. We could not see that their greatest weapon was themselves. Their persistence, their imagination, their refusal to surrender." The chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the dying machines and the blinking light of the recorder. His breathing was shallow, every inhalation sharp and painful. Yet he spoke on, driven by the need to bear witness. "I have seen their victories. I have seen fleets fall to ships smaller than our fastest scouts. I have seen entire armies vanish, only for the survivors to rise again, stronger, wiser, and more determined. Every loss became a lesson. Every death a promise. And every time, they rose again." He closed his eyes, remembering the faces of humans he had seen in battle, young, fearless, unwavering. They fought not for glory, not for conquest, but because they refused to yield. Their courage was terrifying, their ingenuity unstoppable. "I remember the siege of Dralmer Prime," he whispered. "We thought we had cornered them. Thousands of our ships surrounded their last stronghold. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched. And yet, they did not surrender. They found ways to turn our weapons against us. They used the chaos of battle as their shield and their weapon. By the time we realized what they had done, our fleet was shattered, our colonies burning. And they stood amidst the wreckage, alive, undefeated." His hands shook as he reached for the recorder, pressing it tightly as if holding on to the last threads of a world that no longer existed. "They were not monsters," he said softly. "They were human. And that is what made them unstoppable. We could destroy their ships, kill their soldiers, burn their colonies, but they always returned. Each generation more determined, more cunning, more unyielding. We could not understand it. We could not stop it. And slowly, we realized our place in the galaxy was ending." The alien's voice grew softer, almost mournful, as he recounted his memories. Every battle, every loss, every human he had faced haunted him. Yet, there was no hatred, only a grim acknowledgement of their greatness. "I have been the last witness," he whispered. "The last of my kind. I have seen the fall of empires, the end of worlds, and the rise of humanity. We believed ourselves invincible. We believed our fleets and weapons were unmatched. We believed we were gods. But humans, they never stop. They adapt. They endure. They persist. And in their persistence, they are stronger than anything we ever imagined. The alien closed his eyes, his mind filled with the memories of fire, steel, and courage. He remembered the final battle, when the last fleets of the galaxy had united against humanity, only to fall one by one. He remembered seeing the humans survive impossible odds, improvise against advanced technology, and emerge victorious time and again. They fought not for power, he said, voice breaking, but for survival, for freedom, for life itself. And in that fight, they became unstoppable. Not because of strength, but because of will. Not because of numbers, but because of heart. They fought, and they endured, and they stood when all else fell. The chamber grew colder, the red light dimming as the alien's energy waned. His voice grew faint, but the conviction did not fade. I record this not to curse them, not to mourn them, but to warn. Humanity is not like us. They are not bound by the rules of war, the traditions of empires, or the limitations of fear. They will keep moving forward, building, creating, surviving. And we are gone. We are gone because we underestimated them. We are gone because we failed to see the truth. He coughed, the sound wet and ragged. Blood fell to the floor. Yet he continued, his final confession spilling out like fire. They are the storm, he whispered. They rise when all falls. They move when all halts. They fight when all yields. And we are nothing against them. Nothing but memories and ruins. The alien's breathing slowed, each inhale weaker than the last. His eyes, once filled with fear and awe, now reflected a solemn peace. He had spoken the truth, recorded it for anyone who might one day listen. And so I leave this, he said softly, as a testament, as a warning, as a confession. We thought we were gods. We thought they were fragile. But humans, they never stop. And now, we are gone. The chamber fell silent. Only the faint blinking of the recorder remained, capturing the last words of a species that had witnessed the unstoppable rise of humanity. The alien slumped fully against the wall, eyes closed, breathing finally still. The story of survival, persistence, and unyielding human spirit had been told. Outside, the galaxy moved on. Humanity marched forward, unbroken, relentless, and eternal. And the last alien, witness to it all,